The invitation arrived on black parchment, sealed with silver wax that burned cold against Mira's fingertips. She should have thrown it into the fire the moment she recognized the emblem, a wolf's head crowned in thorns. But curiosity, that treacherous thing, made her break the seal instead. You are summoned to bear witness. No signature, no explanation. Just an address she knew too well. The Thornwood estate, perched like a vulture's nest on the cliff, overlooking the valley where she'd grown up, where she'd loved, where she'd been destroyed. Mira crumpled the paper, her hands shaking. 3 years. 3 years since she'd fled this town, since she'd packed everything that mattered into a duffel bag and driven until the mountains became plains, until the forests thinned into farmland, until she could breathe without tasting pine and blood on her tongue. 3 years since Kaelin Thornwood had chosen another. And now he dared summon her back. You're not actually going. Her roommate, Josie, stood in the doorway of their cramped apartment, arms crossed. Tell me you're not that stupid. Mira stared at the crumpled invitation, at the words bleeding through the wrinkles. Bear witness. I have to. You don't have to do anything for him. He doesn't own you anymore. He never did, Mira wanted to say, but that would be a lie. For 2 years, Kaelin Thornwood had owned every piece of her time, her body, her foolish, breakable heart, until the night he'd stood before his family and declared another woman his mate. His Luna. The title still tasted like poison. It's not about him, Mira said quietly, reaching for her jacket. It's about me. I need to see it with my own eyes. I need to know it's real, so I can finally let it go. Josie's expression softened, but worry still creased her brow. Then I'm coming with you. No. Mira's voice came out sharper than intended. She softened it. I need to do this alone. The drive back took 6 hours. 6 hours of her stomach, twisting tighter with each familiar landmark. The crooked oak at mile marker 47. The rusted bridge over Coldwater Creek. The hand-painted sign for Marion's Diner where she and Kaelin used to steal away on Sunday mornings. By the time she reached Thornwood proper, dusk had painted the sky in shades of bruised purple and dying gold. The town hadn't changed. Same weathered storefronts. Same judgmental stares from the locals who watched her truck crawl down Main Street. They knew her here. Knew what she'd been to their Alpha. Knew how thoroughly she'd been discarded. Mira kept her eyes forward, her jaw tight, and drove toward the estate. The Thornwood mansion rose from the cliffside like something from a Gothic nightmare, all sharp angles and blackened stone, surrounded by ancient pines that seemed to lean in, listening. Cars lined the long driveway, expensive and gleaming. The pack had come out in force for this, for her replacement's coronation. Mira parked at the far edge of the lot and sat for a moment, hands gripping the steering wheel. Her reflection stared back at her from the rearview mirror, dark circles under brown eyes, hair pulled into a messy knot. The faded scar along her collarbone barely visible above her sweater's neckline. She looked tired, looked broken. Good, she thought bitterly. Let him see what he did. The great hall blazed with candlelight and ceremony. Mira slipped in through the side entrance, keeping to the shadows along the back wall. No one noticed her. All eyes faced forward, toward the dais where Kaelin Thornwood stood beside a woman who could have been carved from marble and moonlight. His Luna, Celine Northcross, daughter of the most powerful pack in the Northern Territories. Beautiful, poised. Everything Mira, a human raised on the edges of pack territory, could never be. Kaelin looked exactly as Mira remembered. Tall and broad-shouldered, with dark hair that curled slightly at his collar and eyes the color of winter. Storms. He wore authority like a second skin, commanding without trying. Even from across the room, she could feel the weight of his presence. An elder stepped forward, carrying an ornate crown woven from silver and bone. The ceremonial words echoed through the hall, ancient and formal. Mira's nails bit into her palms. This is it. Watch him crown her. Watch him give her everything he promised you. Then leave. Finally leave. But as the crown lowered toward Celine's head, something happened. The temperature dropped. Not gradually, but all at once. Like winter had crashed through the windows. Candles flickered and guttered. The crowd murmured, confused. And the crown twisted in the elder's hands. Gasps rippled through the hall as the silver circlet bucked and writhed like a living thing, resisting the elder's grip. It clattered to the floor, rolling across the polished wood, and stopped, directly at Mira's feet. Every head turned. Every eye found her in her shadowed corner. Kaelin's gaze locked onto hers, and the shock that crossed his face was almost worth the humiliation of being here. Almost. "What is the meaning of this?" The elder's voice cracked like a whip, but no one answered. Because the crown, the ancient, sacred symbol of the Luna's authority, had begun to glow. Soft, silver light pulsed from the bone and metal, growing brighter with each passing second. And the carved throne behind Kaelin, the seat passed down through generations of Thornwood Alphas, groaned. Stone scraped against stone. The massive chair shuddered, then shifted 6 inches to the side, angling toward Mira as if drawn by invisible strings. The silence in the hall was absolute. Celine's perfect composure cracked. What witchcraft is this? But Kaelin didn't speak, didn't move. He just stared at Mira with an expression she couldn't name. Shock. Recognition. Something that looked almost like fear. And in that moment, standing in the doorway with a crown at her feet and a throne bowing in her direction, Mira realized with cold, creeping certainty. Coming here had been a terrible mistake. The crown burned against the floor where it had fallen, silver light pooling around Mira's boots like liquid moonlight. She couldn't move, couldn't breathe. Every instinct screamed at her to run, but her legs had turned to stone, rooted to the ancient floorboards as 200 pairs of eyes dissected her where she stood. "Remove her." Celine's voice cut through the stunned silence, sharp and cold as a blade. She doesn't belong here. But when 2 pack enforcers moved toward Mira, Kaelin's hand shot up. "Stop!" The single word carried enough authority to freeze them mid-step. His gaze never left Mira's face, and there was something in those storm-gray eyes she'd never seen before, not in all their time together, not even in their most intimate moments. Recognition, the kind that went deeper than memory. "The throne has spoken." The elder's voice trembled, his weathered face pale in the candlelight. "The seat of ancients acknowledges her." "That's impossible." Celine's composure cracked further, her perfect features twisting. "She's human. She has no claim to. The throne does not recognize humanity or its absence." The elder bent slowly, his joints creaking, and retrieved the crown. The moment his fingers touched the metal, the light dimmed to a faint pulse. "It recognizes fate." The word hung in the air like smoke. Mira finally found her voice. "I don't want this." It came out hoarse, barely above a whisper. "I shouldn't be here." She turned toward the door, desperate to escape, but Kaelin moved faster than should have been possible. One moment he stood on the dais beside his intended Luna. The next he blocked the exit, his large frame filling the doorway. "Don't." His voice dropped low, meant only for her. "Don't run. Not again." The unfairness of it sparked anger through her paralysis. "You don't get to ask that of me. Not after, I know." Something raw flickered across his face. "But we need to talk. Away from here. There's nothing to talk about. You made your choice 3 years ago." "Did I?" The question sounded almost bitter. His hand lifted, hovering near her arm but not quite touching, as if he knew better. As if he remembered she'd learned to flinch from his proximity. "Or did someone make it for me?" Before Mira could process those words, Celine's heels clicked sharply against the floor as she approached. "Kaelin, we have a ceremony to complete." He didn't turn, didn't even acknowledge her. "The ceremony is postponed." "You can't be serious." "I am your alpha." The words came out in a tone that made several pack members bare their throats in instinctive submission. "And I'm telling you we're done for tonight." Celine's face went white with fury, but she stepped back. The crowd began to murmur, uncertain, as Kaelin's attention returned to Mira. "Please," he said. And the single word carried more vulnerability than she'd ever heard from him. "One conversation. Then if you want to leave, I won't stop you." Mira should have refused. Should have shoved past him and driven until dawn, putting this cursed town and its impossible throne and its devastatingly familiar alpha in her rearview mirror forever. But that word fate echoed in her skull, and despite everything, despite the broken promises and the nights she'd cried herself hollow, she needed to understand what had just happened. "Fine?" she whispered. One conversation. Kaelin led her through corridors she remembered too well. Past the library where they'd spent winter evenings tangled together on the leather sofa, past the conservatory where he'd first kissed her among the night-blooming jasmine. Every step felt like walking through a museum of her own heartbreak. He stopped at a door she didn't recognize, a study she'd never seen before, small and private. The moment they crossed the threshold, he closed it behind them and leaned against it, as if physically barring the world from interrupting. "You weren't supposed to come tonight," he said finally. I got an invitation. Not from me. His jaw tightened. I sent no summons. Someone else wanted you here. Mira's skin prickled. Why? I don't know yet, but that crown. He pushed away from the door, moving to the window. Moonlight carved shadows across his profile. It's older than this pack, older than any living shifter. The legends say it chooses the true Luna, the one bonded to the Alpha by fate itself. You're already bonded. The words tasted like ash. To Selene, you chose her. I was ordered to choose her. The admission came out rough, scraped raw, by the Council of Alphas. A political alliance to prevent war between our territories. Mira's breath caught. You never told me. Because I thought I could fight it. He turned to face her, and the anguish in his expression made her chest ache. I thought, if I just waited, if I built my power base strong enough, I could refuse them. Choose you. But they gave me an ultimatum. Wed Selene, or watch your town burn. The floor seemed to tilt beneath her feet. What? They knew, Kaelin said quietly. They knew you were my weakness, and they threatened to raze every human settlement in my territory, starting with Coldwater Creek where your grandmother lived. If I didn't comply. Mira's grandmother, the woman who'd raised her after her parents died, the woman she'd buried just 6 months ago. You should have told me. I know. His voice cracked. But I thought I convinced myself you'd be safer if you hated me. If you left and never looked back. Well, congratulations. Tears burned her eyes, but she refused to let them fall. You succeeded. Kaelin flinched as if she'd struck him. Mira. A howl split the night long, mournful and far too close. Then another joined it. And another. Kaelin's entire body went rigid. No, not tonight. What is it? He was already moving toward the door. Stay here. Lock this behind me. Kaelin. But he was gone, running toward whatever danger those howls signaled, leaving Mira alone in the dark study with questions burning in her throat and the ghost of his confession echoing in her ears. Outside, the howling grew louder, and beneath her breastbone, in a place she'd thought long dead, something ancient stirred awake. Mira didn't lock the door. She should have. Should have followed Kaelin's command and stayed put like a good, obedient human while the wolves dealt with whatever danger prowled outside. But 3 years away from this world had taught her something important. She was done being protected from the truth. The howls had stopped, replaced by something worse, silence, the kind that pressed against her eardrums and made her pulse hammer in her throat. She moved through the darkened corridors, following the path Kaelin had taken. The mansion felt different now, emptied of its crowd. Shadows pooled in corners, and the candles had burned low, casting everything in shades of amber and black. The front doors stood open, swinging slightly in the night breeze. Mira stepped onto the portico and froze. The manicured lawn had become a battlefield. Bodies moved in the darkness, some human-shaped, others caught mid-transformation, their forms rippling between man and beast. Snarls and the wet sound of impact filled the air, and in the center of it all, Kaelin fought. She'd never seen him like this. 3 years ago, he'd kept this part of himself carefully hidden from her, as if his wolf was something shameful, something that might frighten her away. But now, watching him move with inhuman speed and savage grace, she understood what she'd been protected from. Not his violence. His power. He was magnificent and terrifying in equal measure, his body caught in a half-shift that should have been impossible, human enough to stand upright. Wolf enough that his hands had become Tadeasi, that his hands had become Depala's, claws and his eyes burned gold in the moonlight. He caught an attacker mid-lunge, twisted, and threw the wolf 20 feet into the trees. "Stay back!" someone shouted. Mira recognized Marcus, Kaelin's second-in-command, blocking her path. Blood streaked his torn shirt. "You need to get inside." A wolf burst from the tree line, heading straight for them. Mira didn't think. Her hand closed around a fallen branch. Ridiculous. Useless. But before she could even lift it, something erupted from her chest. Not pain. Power. The wolf yelped and skidded to a halt 6 feet away, whining. Its ears flattened against its skull, and then it did something that made Marcus swear. It bowed, head to the ground, throat exposed in perfect submission. To her. What the hell? Marcus stared at Mira like she'd sprouted wings. She felt it then, thrumming beneath her skin, a presence that wasn't hers, ancient and vast. The same presence that had stirred awake when the crown fell at her feet. It pressed, outward, and every wolf on the lawn felt it. One by one, the attackers broke off and retreated into the forest. Even Kalen had stopped fighting, his chest heaving, his transformed face turned toward her with an expression caught between awe and something that looked like grief. The power receded as quickly as it had come, leaving Mira gasping. Her knees buckled, but Marcus caught her before she hit the ground. "Get her inside." Kalen's voice came out rough, still half growl. "Now." They brought her to the same study, but this time she wasn't alone. Kalen paced like a caged animal, while the elder from the ceremony she'd learned his name was Aldrich, examined her with eyes too keen for comfort. "Remarkable," Aldrich murmured. "I've not seen this in 70 years. "Seen what?" Mira demanded. Her hands still trembled. "What's happening to me?" "You bear a Luna's mark." Aldrich gestured to her collarbone, where her scar lay. The scar she'd gotten in a car accident when she was 17. "How did you come by this?" "A wreck. Broken glass." She touched it self-consciously. "What does that have to do with—" "Show me exactly where you crashed." Something in his tone made her heart stutter. "Why?" "Please, Mira." Kalen had stopped pacing. He stood very still, his eyes human again, but haunted, fixed on her face. "This is important." She swallowed hard. Coldwater Bridge. 7 years ago. Aldrich and Kalen exchanged a look that made her stomach drop. "That's impossible," Kalen said softly. "I was there that night." The world tilted. "What?" "There was an attack." His voice had gone flat, carefully controlled. "Rogues targeting pack boarders. We were hunting them, and one broke through our line. It ran onto the bridge just as—" He stopped, his face going pale. "There was a car. I pulled the rogue off before it could break through your window, but we went over the side. Into the ravine." Mira's hand went to her scar. She remembered the crash, remembered the terror and the broken glass. But there were gaps in her memory, black spaces she'd attributed to trauma. "I never saw you. You were unconscious by the time I climbed back up. I made sure you were breathing, that help was coming, and then I left. Humans couldn't know what had happened." His jaw worked. "But when I tried to heal the cut on your neck, to make sure you wouldn't scar, the mark wouldn't fade." Aldrich finished quietly. "Because you'd already bonded her. The moment you touched her blood with intention, the moment you chose to save her over pursuing your enemy, you created a soul tie. The room spun. That's not possible. I'm human. Humanity is irrelevant to a true bond." Aldrich's weathered face was grave. "The throne recognized what you are, Kalen's fated mate. Bound to him 7 years ago by blood and choice, whether either of you understood it or not." Mira looked at Kalen, at the raw anguish written across his features, and understood. He'd known, maybe not, consciously, but some part of him had known from the beginning that what they had was more than human love. That's why losing her had nearly destroyed him, why he'd tried to push her away to protect her, and why tonight, when rogues attacked his territory, her newly awakened bond had responded. "The rogues," she whispered. "They came because of me. They came because someone told them what you are," Kalen said grimly. "Someone who wants to prevent your recognition as Luna." Outside, another howl rose closer this time, and filled with promise. They weren't done. This was only the beginning. Kalen's decision was immediate and non-negotiable. Mira would stay at the estate under guard until they identified who'd sent the rogues. Her objection was equally immediate. "Absolutely not. This isn't a debate." He moved to the window, checking the tree line with the practiced eye of someone who'd defended this territory for years. "Someone orchestrated tonight. The invitation that brought Tunine. You hear? The Crown's reaction? The attack, it's all connected. Then I'll go back to the city. I'll disappear like I did before, and lead them straight to innocent humans." His voice sharpened. "You felt what happened out there, Mira. That power. Every wolf within a mile radius felt you awaken. There's no hiding anymore." She wanted to argue, but the memory of that presence rising through her chest, commanding submission from wolves that should have torn her apart, made the words die in her throat. Aldrich cleared his throat gently. "The Alpha is correct. A newly awakened Luna bond is conspicuous, especially one this strong. You'll draw attention whether you wish to or not. Then what do you suggest?" Mira wrapped her arms around herself, suddenly cold. "I just stay here and pretend the last 3 years didn't happen? Pretend he didn't—" She couldn't finish. Couldn't say, "Abandon me with Kalen standing right there." "I suggest," Aldrich said carefully, "that you learn what you've become." The bond may be ancient, but it's still raw, untrained. If another attack comes and you panic, you could accidentally command our own wolves to stand down while enemies strike. The thought sent ice through her veins. You're saying I'm a liability. I'm saying you're powerful. And power without control is dangerous to everyone, including yourself. Kalen finally turned from the window. The moonlight carved shadows under his eyes, made him look older than his 30 years. You'll have your own wing, your own space. I won't. He swallowed hard. I won't impose on you. But please, Mira, let me keep you safe this time. The raw plea in his voice undid something in her chest. She'd spent 3 years hating him, building walls around the broken pieces of her heart. But standing here now, learning that everything she'd believed about their ending was built on lies and sacrifice, those walls felt dangerously unstable. 1 week, she heard herself say. I'll give you 1 week to figure out who's behind this. Then I'm gone, bond or no bond. Relief flickered across Kalen's face, followed quickly by something that looked like pain, as if he knew a week wouldn't be enough. As if he knew she'd leave anyway, and this time it might actually kill him. The guest wing was exactly as Mira remembered, it luxurious in an understated way, all dark woods and soft fabrics. Someone had lit a fire in the stone hearth, and her bag from the truck sat on the bed, retrieved by staff she'd never seen. She should have felt like a prisoner. Instead, she felt like a ghost haunting her own past. A knock at the door made her tense. Come in. Not Kalen. Marcus entered, carrying a tray of food she didn't want. He set it on the small table by the window and lingered, clearly uncomfortable. Spit it out, Mira said tiredly. He never stopped looking for you. The words came out in a rush. After you left, he hired investigators, scoured every city within 500 miles, drove himself half mad, until Aldrich told him tracking you down would only put you in more danger. Mira sank onto the edge of the bed. Why are you telling me this? Because you need to know whatever you think happened between you two. However much it hurt, he's been dying slowly ever since. Marcus's jaw tightened. A bonded alpha separated from his mate doesn't just move on. We age wrong, get violent. Some go rogue themselves. He seems fine to me. He's good at pretending. Marcus moved toward the door, then paused. But I've known Kalen since we were kids, and I've never seen him as close to breaking as he was tonight, watching you walk away from him again. After Marcus left, Mira stood at the window and stared out at the forest. Somewhere in those trees, rogues circled, waiting for another chance. And somewhere in this sprawling house, Kalen probably stood at his own window, maintaining the distance she'd demanded. The bond hummed beneath her skin, a constant awareness of exactly where he was, 2 floors down, eastern wing, close enough to reach in seconds if she needed him. She pressed her palm against the cold glass and tried not to think about how much she wanted to close that distance. Sleep, when it finally came, brought dreams. She stood in a forest glade bathed in silver moonlight. A massive black wolf watched her from the shadows, its eyes the exact gray of a winter storm. She knew those eyes, had stared into them countless times while wrapped in sheets that smelled like pine and rain. You shouldn't be here, his voice said without words, resonating through the dream space. Where is here? The bond space. Where mates meet when the physical world isn't safe. The wolf moved closer, and she saw the weariness in the set of his shoulders, the weight he carried. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to pull you in. I was only checking on me, she finished. He didn't deny it. In this place, lying seemed impossible. The bond laid them both bare. I missed you, he admitted, the words stark and painful. Every day, every hour, missing you was like missing my own heartbeat. Mira felt tears on her cheeks, hot against the cool dream air. You could have told me the truth, could have let me choose, to die for me? The wolf's form shimmered, and suddenly Kalen stood before her in human form, close enough to touch. Because that's what would have happened. The council would have made an example of you to keep me in line. I couldn't, his voice broke. I couldn't watch you burn. She understood then, with devastating clarity, that there had been no good choices that night 3 years ago, only terrible ones, and he'd taken the weight of that decision on himself to spare her. I hate you for it, she whispered. I know. He lifted his hand, fingers hovering near her face. I hate myself for it too. The dream shattered as a howl ripped through the night, real this time. Not imagined. Mira jolted awake to find her room ice cold despite the fire, and carved into the frost on her window, drawn by a claw from outside. 7 days, Kaylin reached her room before she could even scream. The door burst open, and he was there barefoot, shirtless, eyes flashing gold in the darkness. He took in the frosted window and the carved message with a single glance, then moved to stand between Mira and the glass. How close? AP. Marcus appeared in the doorway seconds later, fully dressed despite the late hour. Close enough to mark the window without triggering the perimeter wards. Kaylin's voice came out controlled, but Mira could see the tension in his shoulders, the barely leashed violence in the set of his jaw. Which means we have a traitor. The words hung in the air like smoke. Marcus swore, I'll wake the sentries. Start interrogations. No. Kaylin's eyes never left the window. Whoever did this wants us paranoid, turning on each other. We play into their hands if we start a witch hunt. Then what do you suggest? We just wait for them to strike. Again? We set a trap. Kaylin finally turned, and his gaze found Mira's. But first, she needs protection that goes beyond guards and wards. Mira's skin prickled. What kind of protection? A blood ward, tied to me. He moved closer, and she could feel the heat radiating from his skin, the barely contained power that thrummed beneath it. It would let me feel if you're in danger. Let me reach you instantly, no matter where you are on the estate. Reach me how? Through the bond space, the place you visited in your dream. His expression softened slightly. I felt you there, Mira. Felt your fear and confusion. A blood ward would strengthen that connection, make it permanent. She stepped back, needing distance. So I'd never be alone in my own head again? You'd be able to shield your thoughts. I'd teach you how. He ran a hand through his disheveled hair, a gesture of frustration she remembered too well. I know what I'm asking. I know it's invasive. But that message 7 days, it's not a random threat. Someone's given you a deadline. A deadline for what? I don't know, but I'm not willing to find out the hard way. Marcus shifted in the doorway. There's another option. We could move her to the safe house in the Northern Territory. Somewhere the rogues wouldn't think to. No. The word came from Mira, surprising them both. She stared at the frosted warning on her window and felt something harden in her chest. I'm done running. Done being protected from fights that are apparently mine whether I want them or not. Kaylin's eyes searched her face. Mira, if this bond makes me a Luna, if I have this power, then teach me how to use it. She lifted her chin, meeting his gaze directly. And yes, the blood ward. Whatever it takes to make sure I can fight back. Something fierce and possessive flashed across Kaylin's features before he locked it down. It'll hurt. The binding. Everything about this hurts. She held out her hand. Palm up. Do it. They sent Marcus away and locked the door. Aldrich arrived minutes later, carrying a wooden case that looked older than the estate itself. He set it on the table and opened it with reverent care, revealing silver instruments that gleamed in the firelight. A blood ward hasn't been performed in this pack for 3 generations, Aldrich said quietly. It's not to be undertaken lightly. I understand. Mira's voice sounded steadier than she felt. The elder nodded and began preparing the ritual. Salt in a circle, candles at cardinal points, words in a language that predated English, guttural and ancient. Kaylin knelt across from her in the circle's center. In the candlelight, he looked like something out of myth, all sharp edges and controlled power. He held out his hand, and she placed hers in it. The touch sent electricity up her arm. The ward requires an exchange, Aldrich explained. Blood to blood, spoken truth to spoken truth. Alpha, you'll bind first. Kaylin took the silver knife. Aldrich offered and drew it across his palm without hesitation. Blood welled dark and red. Then he pressed his hand to Mira's collarbone, directly over her scar. Heat bloomed beneath his touch, spreading through her chest like wildfire. I bind my protection to Mira Ashford. Kaylin's voice dropped to a resonant tone that seemed to echo from everywhere and nowhere. What threatens her threatens me. What hunts her hunts me. By blood and bond, I claim her safety as my own. The heat intensified until Mira gasped. She felt him then, not just his hand on her skin, but his presence inside the bond. Vast and fierce and utterly focused on her. Now you! Aldrich handed her the knife. Her hand shook as she cut her own palm. The pain was sharp and bright, grounding. She reached up and pressed her bloody hand over Kaylin's heart. His breath hitched. I accept this binding, she said, surprised by the strength in her voice, and offer my own in return. What threatens you threatens me. By blood. And bond, she faltered. The words Aldrich had taught her were, "I claim your safety as my own," but they felt too big, too permanent, too much like a promise she wasn't ready to make. Kaylin's free hand came up to cover hers, pressing it harder against his chest. She could feel his heartbeat, rapid and strong. "It's all right," he murmured, so quietly only she could hear. "Say it. You can hate me and still want me alive." The understanding in his words, the raw vulnerability, broke something loose in her. "I claim your safety as my own," she finished. The bond exploded between them. Mira cried out as power surged through every nerve, every cell. She felt Kaylin's wolf rise to meet it, not separate from him but integral, woven through his very being, felt his strength and his scars, his love and his guilt, the crushing weight of leadership he'd carried since he was barely more than a boy. And beneath it all, she felt his absolute, unwavering devotion to her. When the power finally receded, she found herself collapsed against his chest, his arms wrapped around her, both of them breathing hard. "It's done," Aldrich said softly. Outside, a wolf howled in challenge. The 7-day countdown had begun. Mira woke in her own bed with no memory of getting there. The blood ward pulsed beneath her skin like a second heartbeat, steady, constant, and undeniably his. She could feel Kaylin somewhere in the eastern wing, awake despite the early hour. His emotions filtered through the bond in muted colors. Vigilance, exhaustion, and underneath it all, a gnawing worry he was trying to suppress. She sat up slowly, her head swimming. The room looked different in daylight, less haunting, more like a gilded cage. Someone had cleaned the frost from the window and left fresh clothes folded on the chair. A note in masculine handwriting sat beside them. "Training starts at dawn, the garden maze." Mira glanced at the clock. Dawn was in 15 minutes. She dressed quickly in the clothes provided dark leggings, a fitted shirt, boots meant for running. Everything fit perfectly, which meant Kaylin had remembered her sizes after 3 years apart. The thought unsettled her more than it should have. The garden maze sprawled behind the estate, a labyrinth of 8-foot hedges that had been there longer than the house itself. Mira found Kaylin at its entrance, dressed similarly in black, his hair still damp from a shower. He looked her over, and something flickered in his eyes. "You came. You said training. I'm here to train." She kept her voice neutral, but the bond betrayed her. He'd feel the nervous energy thrumming through her veins, the hyper-awareness of his proximity. "The ward works both ways," he said quietly, acknowledging the elephant between them. "I can teach you to shield, but it takes practice. For now, try not to think too loudly." Heat crept up her neck. I know." A ghost of a smile touched his lips. "But your heartbeat just spiked, and I can taste your embarrassment on the bond. Give it time. You'll learn to control what bleeds through." She cleared her throat. "You said something about training?" Kaylin's expression sobered. "The Luna power you manifested during the attack. It's instinctive, but dangerous if you can't direct it. Today, we work on basic control. Making wolves submit is one thing. Being able to release them, or command specific actions, is another. And if I can't learn?" "You will." His certainty was absolute. "You're stronger than you think, Mira. You always have been." The compliment shouldn't have warmed her. She locked it away and followed him into the maze. Training was brutal. Kaylin had recruited 3 younger pack members volunteers, he assured her, though they looked terrified to act as practice targets. The goal was simple: make them submit without rendering them completely immobile. Control, not domination. Simple in theory, impossible in practice. The first hour, Mira either did nothing or accidentally dropped all 3 wolves into groveling submission so complete they couldn't move. Frustration built like pressure behind her eyes. "You're thinking of it like a blunt instrument," Kaylin said, circling her in the small clearing where they worked. "But Luna authority is surgical. You need to visualize exactly what you want them to do." "I'm trying." "No, you're forcing. There's a difference." He stopped in front of her, close enough that she had to tilt her head back to meet his eyes. "Feel the bond between us right now. How it exists without effort. That's what you need with them: connection, not compulsion." Mira closed her eyes and reached for the sensation he described. The bond thrummed warm and alive, a tether that required no maintenance, no conscious thought. It simply was. She extended that same awareness toward the 3 young wolves watching nervously from the edge of the clearing. There. Faint threads connecting her to each of them, thinner than her bond with Kaylin, but present. Pack bonds, she realized. the web that connected Aluna to her wolves. She focused on the smallest thread, belonging to a gangly teenager named Evan, and thought, "Sit." Evan's legs folded beneath him, but his expression stayed alert, confused but not terrified. "Good." Kaylin's voice came from directly behind her now, his breath warm on her neck. "Again. Tell him to stand. Stand." Evan scrambled to his feet, relief washing over his features. Pride surged through the bond, not hers, Kaylin's. She felt his satisfaction as if it were her own, layered with something deeper, more possessive. The alpha in him recognized what she was becoming, and he was pleased. The realization sent heat pooling low in her stomach. "Careful." Kaylin's voice dropped to a murmur meant only for her. "When you feel something strongly, it echoes. I can taste what that pride did to you." She spun to face him, cheeks flaming. "This is impossible. How am I supposed to learn anything if every stray thought broadcasts by learning to shield, which we'll work on next?" His eyes had darkened to slate gray. "But Mira, if we're going to survive what's coming, you need to accept that this bond doesn't let us hide from each other. Not completely. Then maybe this was a mistake. Maybe he didn't look away. But it's done now. We're bound, and whoever is hunting you has 6 days left on their countdown." The reminder doused her frustration like cold water. "You think the message was literal? 7 days until what?" "Until they make their move. Whatever this is, the invitation, the crown, the attacks, it's building toward something specific." Kaylin's jaw tightened. "Which is why you need to master at least basic control, today." They worked until lunch, until Mira could reliably command simple actions from pack members without overwhelming them. By the time Kaylin called a break, exhaustion dragged at her bones. She collapsed onto a stone bench at the maze's heart, accepting the water bottle he offered. "You did well," he said, sitting beside her but maintaining careful distance. "Better than most Luna candidates I've read about." "Candidates?" The word tasted bitter. "You mean like Celine?" Kaylin's expression shuddered. "Selene was never meant to be my Luna. The bond knows the difference between a political arrangement and fate." "Does she?" "She's been informed the ceremony is postponed indefinitely. She's not pleased." An understatement, Mira suspected. A woman like Celine Northcross didn't accept rejection gracefully. Before she could respond, Marcus burst into the clearing, his face pale. "We found something. In the western woods." Kaylin was on his feet instantly. "What?" "A shrine. Fresh." Marcus's throat worked. "And a ritual circle. Someone's performing blood magic on Packlands. Show me." Mira stood too. "I'm coming." Kaylin started to protest, then seemed to think better of it. The bond hummed. Between them he felt her determination. Knew arguing would waste time they didn't have. "Stay close," was all he said. They followed Marcus into the forest, where something dark and ancient waited among the trees. The shrine sat in a hollow where sunlight struggled to penetrate, surrounded by trees so old their roots had broken through the earth like skeletal fingers. Mira felt it before she saw it, a wrongness that made her skin crawl, and the bond recoil instinctively. Beside her, Kaylin had gone utterly still, his eyes tracking over the scene with predatory focus. The circle had been carved into the earth itself, symbols that hurt to look at directly. At its center sat a crude altar, built from river stones. And on that altar, "Is that blood?" Mira's voice came out thin. "Wolf blood." Aldrich had joined them, his weathered face grave as he studied the markings, mixed with something else, something human. Kaylin crouched at the circle's edge, careful not to disturb anything. How recent. Within the last day. The blood hasn't fully dried. Aldrich produced a small vial from his coat and collected a sample with practiced efficiency. "But this ritual, I haven't seen its like in 40 years. What does it do?" Marcus asked. The elder's silence stretched too long. "Aldrich," Kaylin's voice carried command. "What does it do?" "It's a severing ritual." Aldrich's hands trembled slightly as he stoppered the vial. "Designed to break a bond between mates. Permanently." The words hit Mira like a physical blow. The blood ward beneath her skin flared hot, as if responding to the threat. Kaylin stood slowly, his expression carefully blank, but she felt his rage through the bond, cold and controlled and absolutely lethal. "Someone's trying to break our bond. Not trying, preparing." Aldrich gestured to the incomplete symbols. "This is only the first stage. The ritual requires 3 nights of casting, each one bringing the caster closer to their goal. Tonight would be the second night." Then we destroy it. Marcus moved forward, but Aldrich caught his arm. No. Disturbing an incomplete blood ritual would be. He searched for words. Catastrophic. The magic would lash out, likely killing everyone within a mile radius. So we just leave it? Mira heard the edge of panic in her own voice. Let them finish whatever this is? We set a watch. Kaylin's tactical mind was already working. Whoever's casting this has to return tonight to complete the second stage. We'll be waiting. They'll expect that, Marcus argued. Then we'll be smarter. Kaylin turned to Mira, and she saw the calculation behind his eyes. The bond, can you feel if I'm nearby? Even if you can't see me? She tested it, reaching along that golden thread that connected them. Yes, within maybe 50 yards. I'd know exactly where you were. Good. That means I can position myself close without being obvious. He looked at Marcus. Pull back all sentries to the inner perimeter. Make it look like we're fortifying the house, abandoning the outer woods. You want to use yourself as bait, Mira realized. I want to use us as bait. His eyes held hers. You'll be here, in the clearing, visible, vulnerable. I'll be hidden, close enough to strike the moment they show themselves. Absolutely not. The refusal came from somewhere primal. The thought of standing in this cursed place, waiting for an enemy to emerge, made every instinct scream. There has to be another way. There isn't. Kaylin moved closer, his voice dropping. This is what they want, Mira. They're trying to break us apart because they know we're stronger together. We use that. We show them exactly how strong. She wanted to argue, but through the bond she felt his certainty, his absolute faith that he could protect her. It should have been reassuring. Instead, it terrified her, because she'd learned the hard way that even Kaylin's protection had limits. What if it's not a rogue doing this? The question escaped before she could stop it. What if it's someone inside the pack? The silence that followed confirmed her fear. We've considered that possibility, Aldrich said carefully. Which is why only those in this clearing will know the plan. They spent the afternoon preparing. Kaylin positioned his most trusted warriors at strategic points throughout the forest, but far enough from the shrine that they wouldn't alert a cautious caster. Mira tried to rest, but anxiety kept her pacing her room until Marcus knocked with an early dinner she couldn't eat. As dusk fell, Kaylin came to walk her to the hollow. He'd changed into dark clothes that would blend with the shadows, and he carried weapons she pretended not to see. The walk through the forest was silent except for the crunch of leaves and the distant calls of nightbirds. At the clearing's edge, he stopped. I'll be 20 yards north, behind the fallen oak. His hand lifted, hovering near her face. If anything feels wrong, anything at all, you call through the bond. Don't try to be brave. I'm not brave. I'm terrified. I know. His thumb brushed her cheek, the touch feather-light. I can feel it. But I also feel your determination. Your strength. You're not the same woman who left 3 years ago, Mira. Neither are you. She studied his face in the dying light, seeing the new lines around his eyes, the weight he carried in the set of his shoulders. You've changed too. Losing you changed me. The admission came out raw. I won't survive it twice. Before she could respond, he melted into the shadows, and she was alone. Mira positioned herself near the altar, close enough to be seen by anyone approaching, but not so close the dark magic made her skin crawl. The blood ward pulsed steadily, Kaylin's presence a warm anchor in the darkness. Minutes stretched. An hour. The moon rose, nearly full, painting everything in silver and shadow. Then she felt it, another presence in the forest. Not Kaylin or his hidden warriors. Something else. Something that moved wrong, its footsteps too light, too deliberate. The bond flared in warning. A figure stepped into the clearing, hooded and carrying a leather satchel. They moved to the altar with practiced ease, as if they'd done this before. When they pushed back their hood, Mira's breath stopped. It was Celine. The woman who should have been Kaylin's Luna knelt before the blood-stained altar and began to chant in the same guttural language Aldrich had used for the blood ward. But where his ritual had felt ancient and sacred, this felt poisoned. You can't have him, Celine whispered, pulling a silver knife from her satchel. He was promised to me. Promised. She drew the blade across her palm, and the ritual circle began to glow. Mira's paralysis lasted only a heartbeat before the blood ward screamed a warning through her entire body. Kaylin exploded from the shadows, moving with inhuman speed, but Celine was faster than she should have been. The moment his boots hit the clearing, she slammed her bleeding palm against the altar. The ritual circle ignited. Pain lanced through Mira's chest, white-hot and devastating. She felt the bond stretching, fraying, as dark magic tore at the threads connecting her to Kalen. She collapsed to her knees, gasping, and through the agony felt his answering scream echo through their connection. "Stop!" Kalen's voice came out as a command that would have dropped any wolf in submission. But Selene only laughed. "You can't command me anymore, Alpha." Her eyes had gone black, pupils swallowed by whatever power she'd invoked. "I completed the second binding. Your precious bond is dying." Mira tried to stand, but her legs wouldn't cooperate. The bond thrashed inside her chest like a dying animal, each pulse weaker than the last. Through the dimming connection, she felt Kalen's rage and terror in equal measure. He couldn't reach Selene, not without crossing the active ritual circle, which would kill him instantly. "Why?" The word tore from him. "You knew what she was to me. I knew you'd never love me." Selene's composure cracked, revealing the raw desperation beneath. "I knew every time you looked at me, you saw her. Every time you touched me, you wished for her skin." She pressed her palm harder against the altar, and Mira screamed as another wave of severing magic crashed through the bond. "So, I found someone who promised me a way to make you forget, to erase her from your soul completely." "Who?" Kalen snarled. "Who gave you this magic?" But Selene was chanting again, the guttural words building in intensity. Blood poured from her hand onto the altar, far more than any cut should produce. The symbols carved into the earth pulsed with each syllable. Mira felt the bond unraveling strand by strand, felt Kalen's presence dimming like a candle in the wind. In desperation, she reached for the Luna power that had manifested during the rogue, attacked that ancient authority that had made wolves bow. The power rose, but sluggish, weakened by whatever magic Selene wielded. Not enough, she realized with creeping horror. "I'm not strong enough." Then Aldrich's voice cut through the clearing, sharp with authority. "Selene Northcross, you are in violation of the old laws. Cease this ritual immediately, or face judgment." The elder stepped into view, flanked by Marcus and 3-pack enforcers. But Selene only smiled, blood streaming down her arm now, pooling on the altar. "The old laws are dead. A new age is coming." Her eyes found Mira, and the hatred there was absolute, starting with her death. She pulled a second knife from her satchel, this one aimed at Mira. Kalen moved without thinking, launching himself across the ritual circle despite the certain death it promised. But before he could reach Selene, before her blade could find Mira's heart, something impossible happened. The bond, that fraying, dying connection suddenly blazed to life. Not with warmth, with fire. Mira felt it surge through her veins, hotter and brighter than anything she'd experienced. This wasn't the gentle authority she'd practiced that morning. This was primal, ancient, the kind of power that had existed before packs, before civilization, when the first shifters walked the earth, and their mates commanded not through force but through absolute, undeniable right. The word that left her lips wasn't English, wasn't any language she'd ever learned, but every wolf in the clearing understood it. "Kneel." The command detonated outward like a shockwave. Selene's legs buckled mid-strike, slamming her to the ground so hard Mira heard bone crack. The knife flew from her grip. Marcus and the enforcers dropped instantly, unable to resist. Even Aldrich, ancient and powerful, sank to one knee. Only Kalen remained standing, suspended mid-leap over the ritual circle. The dark magic couldn't touch him. The Luna power had created a shield of pure authority that burned away Selene's curse like morning fog. He landed in a crouch, his shocked eyes finding Mira's. Through the bond, now burning brilliant and unbreakable, she felt his awe. "Impossible!" Selene gasped from the ground, her face pressed into the dirt. "The ritual should have you shouldn't be able to. You tried to sever a bond that was forged in blood and choice 7 years ago." Mira rose on shaking legs, the power still crackling through her. "Did you really think a few nights of borrowed magic could undo fate itself?" Aldrich struggled to his feet, his expression stunned. "Mira, how did you— The strength required to counter a severing ritual shouldn't be possible for a new Luna. She's not a new Luna." Kalen's voice carried quiet realization. "She's been mine for 7 years. The bond's been dormant, yes, but building, growing stronger in the dark. That's why the throne recognized her. Why she could command rogues without training." He crossed to Mira in 3 strides and caught her as her legs finally gave out. The moment he touched her, the bond settled, the fire banking to a warm, steady glow. "I've got you," he murmured against her hair. For the first time in 3 years, she let herself believe it. "Take Selene to the holding cells. Kaelin commanded without looking away from Mira. And find out who gave her that ritual. Someone powerful enough to craft a severing spell isn't working alone. As the enforcers dragged a struggling Celine away, she screamed over her shoulder. You think this is over? He's already here. He's been here the whole time, and when he's done with you both, there won't be enough left to bury. The words echoed through the hollow long after she disappeared into the trees. Mira looked up at Kaelin. Who is she talking about? His jaw tightened. I don't know, but we're going to find out. The bond hummed between them, stronger than ever, but underneath that strength, a new thread of fear had woven itself through. Because somewhere in the darkness, someone powerful enough to teach blood magic to a desperate woman was watching. Waiting. They didn't return to the estate immediately. Kaelin carried Mira deeper into the forest, away from the cursed hollow and the questions that would come. She should have protested, should have demanded answers about Celine's cryptic warning, but exhaustion had settled into her bones like lead. The Luna power had burned through her reserves completely. He brought her to a place she'd never seen, a small cabin tucked into a grove of silver birch trees, so well hidden she would have walked past it a dozen times without noticing. Moonlight filtered through the canopy, painting everything in shades of pearl and shadow. What is this place? Her voice came out hoarse. Somewhere safe. Kaelin shouldered open the door and carried her inside. The cabin was sparse but comfortable. A stone fireplace, a bed covered in thick furs, shelves lined with books. A father built it. A place to think without the weight of the pack pressing down. He settled her on the bed and moved to light the fire. Mira watched the play of muscles beneath his shirt, the careful efficiency of his movements. Through the bond, she felt his concern for her layered over a deeper turmoil he was trying to suppress. You can't hide what you're feeling anymore, she said quietly. The bond won't let you. His hands stilled on the kindling. I know. Then talk to me. Tell me what Celine meant. Who's already here? Kaelin finished lighting the fire before turning to face her. In the flickering light, he looked younger somehow, less like an alpha, and more like the man she'd fallen in love with years ago. The man who'd read poetry to her on rainy afternoons and held her through nightmares she never explained. There's a reason the council forced me to choose Celine. He moved to sit on the edge of the bed, careful to maintain some distance. Her father, Dominic Northcross, controls the Northern Territories. He's powerful, ambitious, and he's been consolidating smaller packs under his rule for years. A power grab. More than that. He believes in the old ways before the treaties, before we learned to coexist with humans. He wants to return to a time when shifters ruled through strength and fear. Kaelin's hands clenched into fists. The council thought a marriage alliance would satisfy him, keep him from starting a war. Mira felt ice creep down her spine. But it didn't. No, because he never wanted Selene to be my Luna for political reasons. He wanted her here as a spy, a way to control my pack from the inside. His eyes found hers, haunted. When I refused to complete the ceremony, when the throne chose you instead, I didn't just reject Selene. I declared war on her father. The full weight of what she'd done settled over Mira. By accepting the bond, by surviving Celine's ritual, she'd painted a target on both their backs. That's who she meant, Mira whispered. Dominic. He's the one who taught her the severing ritual. And if he's already here, already inside my territory? Kaelin's voice dropped to something dangerous. Then we're surrounded by more than rogues. We're dealing with an invasion force. Silence fell between them, broken only by the crackle of the fire. Through the bond, Mira felt his guilt. The crushing weight of knowing his choices, his refusal to be controlled, had put her in the crosshairs of something far more dangerous than she'd imagined. You should have told me, she said. 3 years ago. All of it. I thought I was protecting you. He laughed bitterly. Turns out I was just being a coward. Afraid that if you knew the full truth what being bonded to me would cost, you'd choose to leave anyway. So you made the choice for me. Yes. No excuses. No justifications. Just brutal honesty. And I'd apologize, but we both know sorry doesn't fix what I broke. Mira stared at him. This man, who'd carried the weight of his pack, his territory, and his impossible love for her in silence, who'd pushed her away to keep her safe, only to have fate drag them back together anyway. She should hate him. Part of her still did. But a larger part, the part connected to him through blood and bone, and 7 years of dormant longing, understood. Come here, she said softly. Kaelin's eyes widened. Mira, please. He moved slowly, as if approaching something wild that might bolt. When he sat beside her, close enough that their shoulders touched. She felt the tension thrumming through him. "You can't keep protecting me by pushing me away," she said, staring at the fire. "Not anymore. The bond won't allow it. Whatever's coming, Dominic, his forces, this war you've been trying to prevent, I'm in it now, whether you want me to be or not." "I know." His voice cracked on the words. "Then stop treating me like I'm fragile. Stop deciding what I can handle." She turned to face him, and the firelight caught the wetness on his cheeks. "I'm not the naive girl you fell in love with. I've survived 3 years thinking you abandoned me. I've built a life from nothing, and tonight, I stopped a blood ritual that should have killed us both." "You were magnificent," he breathed. "When that power rose in you, Mira, you have no idea how rare that is, how powerful you've become. Then trust that power. Trust me." She reached up and cupped his face, feeling the roughness of stubble against her palm. "Let me stand beside you, as an equal, as your mate." The word hung between them, acknowledged for the first time without fear or reservation. Kaylin's hand covered hers, pressing it harder against his cheek. "If I do this, if I stop holding back, there's no going back. The bond will complete fully. You'll feel everything I feel. Share my strength and my burdens. Live with the constant threat that being my Luna brings. I'm already living with it." She smiled sadly. "At least, this way, I get to choose it." Something broke in his expression. He pulled her against his chest, burying his face in her hair, and through the bond she felt 7 years of longing crash through both of them like a tidal wave. "I love you," he whispered against her temple. "I never stopped, not for a single moment." "I know." She held him tighter. "I feel it. I've always felt it." Outside, a wolf howled closer than before. The countdown had reached 5 days. But wrapped in each other's arms, with the bond blazing between them like a star, they'd face whatever came next together. Dawn broke cold and unforgiving. Mira woke tangled in Kaylin's arms, the bond humming contentedly between them. They'd talked through most of the night not about strategy or threats, but about the small things they'd missed. Her life in the city. His struggles leading a pack that questioned every decision. The holes each had left in the other's world. It wasn't forgiveness, not entirely, but it was understanding. "We need to go back," Kaylin murmured against her hair, though neither of them moved. "Celine will have talked by now. We need to know what she's revealed." Mira nodded, but allowed herself one more moment of peace before the storm. Through the cabin's single window, frost glittered on the birch trees like diamonds. Beautiful and deadly, much like everything else in this world she'd been pulled into. "Kaylin," she said quietly. "When this is over, whatever happens, I need to know something." He pulled back enough to meet her eyes. "Anything. Would you have come for me? Eventually? If the throne hadn't forced our reunion?" The question had haunted her through the sleepless hours. Had fate orchestrated their reconciliation, or would he have found the courage on his own? His hand came up to cup her face. "Every day for 3 years, I stood at the border of my territory and looked toward the city. Every day, I told myself tomorrow I'd be strong enough, that tomorrow I'd find a way to keep you safe and still keep you." His thumb traced her cheekbone. "I don't know if that day would have ever come, but I'd like to think I would have been brave enough eventually. Honest, painful, perfectly him." "We should go," she said, and this time they both moved. The estate was in controlled chaos when they arrived. Marcus met them at the entrance, his expression grim. Celine still not talking. Won't say a word about Dominic or his plans. He fell into step beside Kaylin. But we found something else. Blood trail leading from the western border toward the holding cells. Fresh. Ended at the outer wall. "Someone tried to break her out?" Kaylin's voice went cold. "Or silence her." Marcus handed him a tablet showing security footage. "We caught a figure on the perimeter, cameras around 3 a.m. But look at the way they move." Mira peered at the screen. The figure was hooded, impossible to identify, but their movements were wrong, too fluid, too fast. Not quite. Human, but not quite wolf either. "Hybrid," Kaylin breathed. "Someone's using hybrid magic." Aldrich appeared from the hallway, his face grave. "I've tested the blood sample from Celane's ritual. The human component wasn't random, it was taken from a specific bloodline. One I thought extinct." "Which bloodline?" Mira asked. The elder's eyes found hers with something that looked like pity. "Yours." The world tilted. "That's impossible. I don't have any family left. Your grandmother was human, yes, but your grandfather, the man she never spoke of, was a wolf. Aldrich's voice gentled. Not pack, not bound by our laws. A lone wolf who fell in love with a human woman and hid what he was until the day he disappeared. Mira's legs went weak. Kaylin's arm wrapped around her waist, steadying her. You're saying I'm not fully human. The words felt foreign on her tongue. I'm saying you carry dormant shifter blood, not enough to transform, but enough to bond with an alpha in ways a full human never could. Aldrich gestured to her collarbone, where her scar lay. That's why the mark took when Kaylin's blood touched yours. Why the throne recognized you. You're something rare, a bridge between both worlds. And Dominic knows. Kaylin's voice had gone deadly quiet. That's why he wanted Celine to break our bond. Because Mira isn't just my mate, she's a threat to his entire ideology. Living proof that humans and shifters aren't as separate as he wants his followers to believe. The pieces fell into place with sickening clarity. The invitation that had brought her here. The Crown's dramatic recognition. Even the rogue attacks, all of it designed to expose what she was to the entire pack. He's been planning this for years, Marcus realized. Since the moment you bonded her, Alpha. He just needed the right opportunity to strike, and I handed it to him by bringing her back to Packlands. Kaylin's guilt crashed through the bond, sharp and bitter. Mira grabbed his arm. Stop. We're past blame. We need to focus on... The lights went out. Emergency power kicked in seconds later, bathing everything in red. An alarm blared once, then cut off abruptly. Marcus's radio crackled to life. Perimeter breach, multiple contacts, west, north, and eastern boundaries, simultaneously, static. Kaylin's eyes flashed gold. They're here. Dominic's making his move. Through the bond, Mira felt his wolf rise, felt the alpha power that made him a leader surge to the surface. But underneath it, she felt his fear not for himself, but for her. The holding cells, she said urgently. If they're breaching from 3 sides, the cells are exposed. She didn't finish. An explosion rocked the building's western wing, exactly where the holding cells were located. He's taking Celine, Aldrich said grimly. Dead or alive. He can't risk her revealing his plans. Kaylin was already moving. Marcus, get every able wolf to defensive positions. Aldrich, take Mira to the safe. Room. No. Mira's voice carried Luna authority without her meaning it to. I'm not hiding. Not anymore. Mira, you need me. She met his eyes steadily. You said it yourself, I'm a bridge. If Dominic's forces are here to prove humans and shifters can't coexist, then we prove them wrong. Together. Another explosion. Closer this time. Kaylin's jaw worked, torn between instinct and logic. Finally, he nodded once, sharp and decisive. Stay by my side, always within arm's reach. He pulled a blade from his belt and pressed it into her hand. And if anything happens to me, nothing's going to happen to you. She squeezed his fingers. That's not how this story ends. Through the bond, she felt his desperate hope that she was right. They ran toward the sound of battle, toward the flames rising from the western wing, toward whatever waited in the smoke and chaos, toward Dominic Northcross and the war he'd been building. The real fight was just beginning. The western wing was an inferno. Smoke choked the corridors as Kaylin led them through passages Mira didn't know existed, servant halls and hidden routes meant for emergencies. Exactly like this, pack members streamed past in organized chaos, some heading toward the breach, others shepherding non-combatants to safety. Through it all, the bond kept her anchored to Kaylin's presence, his determination bleeding into her fear and transmuting it into something sharper. Purpose. They burst into the courtyard to find Marcus locked in combat with 3 wolves larger than any she'd seen, their eyes gleaming with an unnatural red sheen. Hybrid magic, she realized. Dominic had enhanced his soldiers somehow. The cells are compromised, Marcus shouted, dodging a swipe that would have torn his throat out. They took Celine. Where's Dominic? Kaylin's voice carried over the chaos. Throne room. He's waiting for you. Of course he was. This wasn't just an attack, it was a challenge. A public declaration that Dominic intended to take everything Kaylin had built. Marcus, hold the courtyard. Don't let anyone through to the main house. Kaylin's hand found Mira's, squeezing once. Ready? She nodded, though ready felt like a grotesque understatement. They ran. The throne room doors had been blown off their hinges. Inside, the space that had hosted Celine's failed coronation now hosted something far darker. Dominic Northcross stood before the ancient throne, a man in his 50s with silver threading through dark hair and eyes that held winter's cruelty. He wore authority like a weapon. Celine knelt at his feet, bloody and broken, a collar around her throat that glowed with the same sickly red as his soldier's eyes. Kaelin Thornwood. Dominic's voice carried disappointment more than anger. You could have been great. Could have led our kind into a new age of dominance. Instead, you chose this. His gaze slid to Mira with undisguised contempt. A half-breed pretender. A human playing at power. She doesn't understand. She understands more than you give her credit for. Kaelin positioned himself slightly in front of Mira. Though she felt his reluctance through the bond, he wanted her beside him. Equal, but instinct screamed to shield her. This ends now, Dominic. Leave my territory. Take your enhanced wolves and whatever dark magic you've corrupted yourself with, and leave. Or what? Dominic smiled. You'll fight me? An alpha weakened by a mongrel bond against someone who's transcended the limitations of our kind? He gestured, and the air around him shimmered. The hybrid magic, Mira realized. He'd used it on himself. I've spent years preparing for this moment. Years gathering power while you wallowed in sentiment. Is that what you call love? Mira's voice surprised her, steady despite the terror coursing through her veins. Sentiment? Dominic's attention focused on her fully for the first time. Love is a weakness, a chain that keeps us from our true potential. My daughter understood that until your corrupting influence reminded her of foolish emotions. At his feet, Celine flinched. She's your daughter, Mira said, taking a step forward despite Kaelin's warning growl through the bond. And you've collared her like a dog, put a leash on her free will because she dared to want something beyond your ambition. She failed me, failed her purpose. Dominic's voice went cold. She'll serve as an example of what happens when one allows weakness to fester. You're the weakness. The words left Mira before she could stop them, pulled from somewhere deep and ancient. The Luna power stirred, recognizing a threat to her pack. You hide behind stolen magic and call it strength. You enslave your own blood and call it discipline. But I see what you really are, a tyrant terrified that the world is changing without your permission. The temperature dropped. Dominic moved faster than should have been possible, crossing the space between them in a heartbeat. Kaelin intercepted, their collision sending shockwaves through the room. They crashed through ancient pillars, moving too fast for Mira to track, all fangs and claws and brutal efficiency. But Dominic's hybrid magic made him too strong. Each blow Kaelin landed seemed to barely register, while Dominic's strikes drew blood. The bond screamed in shared agony. Mira felt herself moving before conscious thought caught up. The Luna power rose, that vast ancient authority, but Dominic had prepared for it. The moment she opened her mouth to command, he flicked his hand, an invisible force slammed into her chest. She flew backward, hitting the wall hard enough to crack stone. Through the bond, she felt Kaelin's rage explode, felt him tap into something primal and desperate, the alpha power that had been passed down through generations, the same power that had built this pack from nothing. He drove Dominic back, pushed him away from Mira's crumpled form, and for a moment it seemed like he might actually win. Then Dominic smiled. I was hoping you'd do that. He raised his hand, and the collar around Celine's throat pulsed. You see, I've learned that the best way to control an alpha isn't through force, it's through leverage, Celine screamed. The sound was inhuman, torn from her throat as the collar activated. Whatever magic Dominic had woven into it, it was killing her slowly, agonizingly. Kaelin froze. Stop this, he commanded, all alpha authority in his voice. Make me, Dominic's smile widened. Or better yet, kneel. Submit to my rule, and I'll let her live. Refuse, and I'll make her death last for days. Don't. Celine's voice came out ragged, barely recognizable. Don't give him anything. Let me. The collar pulsed again, cutting off her words with another scream. Mira dragged herself upright, ribs screaming in protest. Through the bond, she felt Kaelin's impossible choice tearing him apart. Save his former mate, the woman he'd once cared, for despite everything, or condemn her to death and continue fighting. There had to be another way. The Luna power stirred again, but different this time. Not commanding, not forcing. Instead, it reached out through the pack bonds, the gossamer threads that connected her to every wolf in this territory, including Celine. Help me, Mira thought desperately into that connection. I can't do this alone. For a heartbeat, nothing happened. Then Celine's eyes found hers across the throne room, pain-filled but aware. And through the thin, battered bond that connected them as pack, Mira felt her answer. Together. Mira didn't know if what she was about to attempt was possible. Didn't know if Luna authority could override hybrid magic, if pack bonds could break enchanted collars. But she'd learned something important in the last few days. Fate didn't give power to those who asked permission. She opened her mouth and spoke the word that had been building in her chest since the moment she'd awayed that the native fording in the last. Walked back into this world. Enough. The word didn't just echo, it detonated. Luna authority exploded outward from Mira like a shockwave of pure will, washing over every living thing in the throne room. But this wasn't the blunt force she'd wielded before. This was surgical. Precise. The collar around Celine's throat shattered. Dominic staggered backward, his hybrid magic flickering like a candle in a storm. For the first time since entering the room, uncertainty crossed his features. Impossible, he breathed. You're untrained. You shouldn't be able to. I'm not untrained. Mira walked forward, each step steady despite her broken ribs. The bond with Kaelin blazed between them, feeding her strength. But it was more than that. Every pack member fighting in the courtyard, every wolf defending their home, she felt them all. Felt their determination and their faith. I've been learning from the best teacher there is. Experience. She stopped in front of Dominic, close enough to see the red gleam of corrupted magic in his eyes. You think power comes from dominance, from breaking others until they submit. The Luna authority wrapped around her words, undeniable as gravity. But real power, the kind that builds packs and territories and futures, comes from connection. From choosing to stand together even when standing alone would be easier. Naive sentiment from a half-breed child. But Dominic's voice lacked its earlier conviction. Maybe. Mira smiled sadly. But this half-breed child is about to take everything you've built and tear it down. Not with force. With choice. She reached out through the pack bonds not just to Kaelin's wolves, but to Dominic's. To the enhanced soldiers fighting in the courtyard, bound by his magic and his cruelty. She felt them there, trapped behind the red sheen of hybrid enchantment, and she offered them something Dominic never had. Freedom. Choose, she thought into those bonds. Stay and fight for a tyrant who sees you as weapons. Or break his hold and find something better. For a heartbeat, nothing happened. Then one of Dominic's wolves in the courtyard stopped mid-strike. The red faded from its eyes, replaced by natural amber. Then another, and another. The tide turned in seconds. Dominic snarled and lunged for Mira, claws extended, but Kaelin was there first. They collided with bone-crushing force, and this time without his enhanced soldiers. Without the advantage of surprise, Dominic was simply a powerful alpha facing someone younger and stronger, someone fighting for love instead of ambition. The battle was brutal but brief. Kaelin drove Dominic to the ground, his claws at the older wolf's throat. Submit, Kaelin commanded, all alpha authority in his voice. Or die. Dominic's eyes flickered between Kaelin and Mira, calculation warring with pride. Finally, slowly, he bared his throat, defeated. 3 days later. The coronation was nothing like the disaster that had preceded it. This time, the throne room was filled with pack members who'd chosen to be there. Kaelin's wolves and the former soldiers of Dominic's army who'd accepted Mira's offer of freedom. Even Celine attended, standing at the back with bandages still visible beneath her formal dress. She'd testified against her father, revealed every detail of his plans, his corrupted magic, his decades of manipulation. In exchange, the Council of Alphas had granted her sanctuary in a neutral territory, far from both her father's prison and the pack she'd betrayed. Before she left, she'd found Mira in the garden. I don't expect forgiveness, Celine had said quietly. What I did trying to break your bond was unforgivable. No, Mira had surprised herself with the truth. It was understandable. Not right, but understandable. Love makes us desperate. He never loved me. No bitterness, just acceptance. And I knew it, but I hoped. She trailed off, then smiled sadly. Take care of him, and Mira, you're stronger than I ever gave you credit for. Now, standing before the throne with the entire pack watching, Mira felt that strength settle into her bones like it had always belonged there. Aldrich stepped forward, carrying the crown, the same one that had rolled to her feet and changed everything. But this time, when he placed it on her head, there was no resistance, no drama, just rightness. Mira Ashford, Aldrich's voice rang through the hall. Do you accept the responsibility of Luna? To lead alongside your alpha? To protect the pack as your own? To bridge the worlds of human and wolf? I do, The words came easily now. Kaelin Thornwood, do you accept Mira as your mate, your Luna, your equal in all things? Kaelin's eyes never left hers. I do. Now and always. The throne room erupted in howls, joyous, celebratory, accepting. Later, when the ceremony ended and the celebration began, Kaelin pulled her into a quiet corner of the garden, where night-blooming jasmine filled the air with sweetness. Regrets? He asked softly, his arms wrapped around her waist. Mira pretended to consider. The broken ribs weren't ideal, and I could have done without the death threats. Fair points. His lips found her temple. Anything else? 3 years, she said quietly. I regret we lost 3 years. I know. His voice roughened. I'll spend the rest of my life making up for that, however long you'll give me. She pulled back enough to meet his eyes. How about forever? Forever's a good start. He kissed her, then deep and thorough and full of promises they'd both keep this time. When they finally broke apart, Mira rested her head against his chest and listened to his heartbeat. Through the bond, she felt his contentment, his love, his bone-deep relief that they'd survived. Kaelin, about those 7 days. She smiled against his shirt. Whoever sent that threat really underestimated us. His laugh rumbled through his chest. Let them all underestimate us. We'll just keep proving them wrong. In the distance, wolves sang to the rising moon. Her pack, her family, her future. And for the first time in 3 years, Mira was exactly where she belonged. Home,